Fox College football analyst Joel Klatt is presented each week by MyBookie.ag. Use code NEXTROUND to double your initial deposit. That's MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND.
All right, Joel Klatt and the folks at Fox. It's hype time. Bloomington, Indiana, 11 a.m. on Fox. LT's been talking about this team since week 2.
Coach Sig
since week 2. Now it's Nebraska and Indiana on the big noon kickoff.
Klatt will be there. Joel Klatt, Fox Sports, unless he corrects me on the fly like he did last week when I gave the wrong game because I didn't know they'd change games. Klatt is brought to you by MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. Welcome in, my friend. How are you today?
Great. No, we're headed to Bloomington, boys. We'll see if this thing is for real or what we've got. I'm excited for it.
Well, Dunaway seems to think they're a fraud. I think they're really good. I mean, they're one of 2 teams that have yet to trail along with Army this year. And look, I know the competition hasn't been great, but I mean, they've gone out and they've taken care of business, Joel. I mean, I think they're like not good enough to win a Big Ten, but I mean, when you start to look at the schedule, they could win 10 games.
Well, yeah, the schedule. Well, think of it this way: they're going to be favored in every game up until Ohio State, which is November 23rd. You know, so even though the brands on the schedule wouldn't suggest that they would be favored, they're playing well enough to be favored. This week against Nebraska, they've got Washington at home. They've got to go to Michigan State. Then they've got Michigan at home. They're going to be favored in every one of those games, which is quite stunning. Let's be honest, right? 2 of those teams played for a national championship last year. One of them won the national championship. And we'll see. I think what's interesting to me when I watch them is their offensive line is vastly improved. Now, here's the question that we have to then ask ourselves is like, by what standard are we calling them like good, right? So if Lance, if you're saying, hey, they could win 10 games and that's really good, yeah, that's absolutely the case. Dunaway, if you're saying, well, are they a playoff team or going to win the Big Ten? Yeah, I don't know about that. So as is always the case in college football, it's kind of like, well, what bar are we trying to define them as a quality team? I don't know if this is going to be a playoff team. They're certainly going to be playing games that have playoff implications, though.
That's right.
Because, you know, an 11-1 Indiana might even wind up in the Big Ten championship game. So, you know, the fact that after this offseason, when Cignetti is sitting there and he's like, Purdue sucks. And you know what? Ohio State and Michigan suck too. You know, it's like this is an incredible year to have this guy be doing this. It's pretty great.
Hey, if Vanderbilt and Indiana played neutral site, who would you take? It's crazy, but I think almost Indiana's kind of
that's a good question. That's a really good question. I believe that Vegas and I would take Indiana slightly. I think that would probably be like a 3 or 4.5 point line towards the Hoosiers. But I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, which quarterback would you rather have, Rourke or Pavia?
Rourke is – they're so perfect for each, like, what they're asked to do, right? Like, Rourke has some good wide receivers. They're running it with Ellison pretty well. Their offensive line is playing much better. If I'm Indiana, I have that offense, I want Rourke, right? Because he's more of a manager and an operator. If I'm running Vanderbilt's system and I need, you know, Pavia and that style of slinger, competitor, athlete, then I want Pavia. Which, here's the thing. You got to credit Kurt Cignetti. You got to credit Clark Lee because they found the guy that was perfect, or they morphed their system and the character of their offense towards what the quarterback can do and is good at doing. So I didn't answer either question.
Yeah. That's
a good one.
I think
I would take Rourke only because I'm partial to operators. You know, guys that can control the game from the pocket. I don't know if Pavia can do that, but boy, Pavia might have a better upside, as evident by the win over Alabama.
My magic football machine says the most likely scenario of an Indiana-Vandy matchup would be the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa. Used to be the Outback Bowl. That is a Big Ten SEC
Let's get it.
matchup.
Let's get it. I hope we get it. Yeah. We've got this phantom matchup between these powers.
And by the way, I would take Pavia because he could quarterback for me. He could play third base on my slow pitch softball team, and he could do a kegger for my fraternity. He could do all that. I don't think Rourke could do that.
All of that. And by the way, I'm just picturing him as my cleanup hitter on slow pitch softball, hitting bombs,
and he's
hitting bombs,
and he's making fun of Rourke and the Indiana boys for sliding a double in slow pitch softball.
No, I think Pavia is the guy in shorts sliding into second.
I do love watching him play football. All right, we get ready for another big SEC matchup in Georgia and Texas this week. You saw Oregon and you saw Ohio State in a classic game. Can you still buy in that Texas is the best team in the country, or because you just saw Oregon and Ohio State in a massive matchup where either team probably could split 10 games? Do you believe Texas is the best team in the country, or do you think it was the Oregon-Ohio State winner?
Well, truthfully, I put Texas number one in my rankings. And the reason is that they've just been so dominant. They're the number one offense, number one defense in the country. And I know that their wins before the season, if you would have said like, oh, they're going to go dominate Michigan, they're going to dominate Oklahoma, we'd be like, wow. But those obviously feel a little different based on the way that those two teams have played. And in particularly, those two teams have played on the offensive side of the ball. So do I think that Texas is probably the best offense in the country? Yeah, close to it. Do I think their defense is the best defense in the country? I'm not sure. I think that maybe those numbers could be inflated by the fact that they faced the two worst ranked offenses that we've seen this season. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Those two offenses, in particular at the time in which they faced Michigan. Maybe Michigan will get a little bit better with Tuttle. Oklahoma is a disaster on offense.
Oh, my gosh.
It is a disaster. And did I not tell you guys a few weeks ago, this is not a Jackson Arnold problem? You're not fixing this with a quarterback change. And like everything needs to go on the offensive side for OU. That is an absolute mess. So I put Texas number one because of their dominance so far. I struggled with like, do I put Oregon up there? And the fact is that I've seen Oregon, and in their bag, I always go back to like, what shots in your bag? I've seen the duck hook of the Idaho game, right? So that's in their bag. Do you remember the 16, 17 U.S. Open at Chambers Bay? You guys are golf fans.
Yeah.
And I think the 17th hole has the railroad tracks on the right side.
Yep.
And Brendan Grace got up to the 17th tee, and we had shot tracer behind him. And he's like right in the thick of the tournament and hits it like right of the railroad tracks.
Not even close to the
tracer just went off the TV like that.
Even see where it landed.
Well, that's in his bag, right? Like, unfortunately, that's in his bag. For Oregon, they have the Brandon Grace like off the bag because that's what we saw against Idaho week one. Was it week one? Yes. Have they changed their offensive line? Yes. Have they fixed their offensive line? Largely, yes. They gave up 6 sacks in their first couple of weeks. They have not given up a sack, in their last few, including not giving up a sack, at least statistically, last week against Ohio State, and a pass rush that we thought was going to be very good. So that for those reasons, I put Texas number one and Oregon number two. And by the way, I kept Ohio State at 3 because they're in position to kick that field goal. Hated the offensive pass interference call. That was a bad call. Officiating in college football is atrocious right now, and specifically with that pass interference, OPI, DPI type of situation.
Joel Klatt is with us. He joins us each week courtesy of mybookie.ag. Code next round. When you sign on, they double that initial deposit. With code next round, bet anything, anytime, anywhere with mybookie.ag. Code next round. You are around a ton of college football coaches and a ton of complexes. I'm just curious because this has come up in relation to the end of the Alabama-South Carolina game. How many coaches do you think school it in their players to not score? If your opponent's out of timeouts, you're under the 2-minute. The way Jeremy Bernard did. Not enough, you don't think?
That specific situation, no one brings it up. I don't think, candidly, a lot of coaches are that confident in terms of knowing that situation has arrived. Most NFL teams have a code word for their huddle that signifies like, we're gaining as many basically first downs, not touchdowns, right? Okay. That's the situation.
The Bengals didn't last night.
Down, and we don't want a touchdown. And so there's a code word, and college teams don't talk about it. And generally speaking, guys, in college, you've got to spend so much time on the basics because the roster is larger. It's turning over constantly. You've got to recruit your own players. You've got to recruit future players. And what's lost is time with your students. So here's an example. 2 weeks ago, I did the UCLA Penn State game, right? And UCLA's offensive coordinator is Eric Bieniemy. Eric was actually the running back coach at Colorado when I first got there as a true freshman. So I've known Eric for a long time. And he bounced around in college and then went to the National Football League, and now he's back, and he's trying to help Deshaun Foster, which, by the way, they're getting a lot better, but not getting the results on the field. But he and I had a long, candid conversation about the differences in the two sports, both schematic, because I was more curious, and I wanted to hear about the schematics. What was the biggest difference in schematics? What was the biggest difference in terms of play calling, the structure of play calling, and the rhythm of play calling? And while I was very interested in what's going on the field, he was most interested in the difference in time that they got to spend with the players. And he said, Joel, the biggest issue in college football is that we don't have enough time to teach the players the sport because of this arbitrary and dumb 20-hour rule that has been around for a long, long time. And I said, where does it show itself first? And he said, situations. We have no ability to have enough time to teach kids the nuance of third downs and red zones and backed up and clock situations. And now the clock situations are even more magnified for two reasons. One is you've got a 2-minute timeout, so everyone gets to reset and really think about the strategy at the end of each half and specifically at the game. And then oh gosh, I lost my train of thought for the second thought. There was two thoughts, and I'm absolutely.
You can run out of bounds now until the 2-minute timeout. You can run out of bounds and the clock keeps going. That used to be a big difference in the final 4 minutes. Now it's down to 2 minutes.
Yes, and the opportunity to teach them about what's going on in those situations is just not there. And he thought that was the biggest difference in the two games. We could talk about the margin between the good player and the average player in college football and how that's a greater margin than at the National Football League level. We can talk about the hash marks and what that actually does to the game and the schematics of the game. But it's more so situational football, and that's why veteran teams tend to have more success now in the modern era, because the longer that you're around one system, then the more that you can go quickly through base offense and you can get to situations. But that's a great instance of a total failure and actually doing the one thing that allows the other team an opportunity to win. That was South Carolina's only opportunity to win, is if they score. And then they did. And you can't do that.
USC, 3 straight losses, 3 blown fourth quarter leads. Now they're sitting there at 3-3. Everything is off the table. Right there, the game you've got this weekend, Matt Rule in year 2, 5-1. Kirk Cignetti in year 1 at Indiana, 6-0. And if you're a USC fan, you used to believe, hey, Lincoln Riley, at least the offense is going to be right. If you watched how he called final possession in regulation, it was a disaster. Do you worry about this team? Because I heard they've got a good collective, but I heard a lot of these guys were too worried about the collective. Instead of winning last year, there was that issue going on, and now that they're 3-3, I just don't know where this team goes now, Joel.
So there isn't a better 3-3 team in the country. They
not going to make that fan base feel better.
I understand that. But everything that I'm going to say is true. Whether people want to hear it or accept it, that's not my problem. What I'm about to say is truthful. They are the best 3-3 team in the country. They are in a much better situation than Oklahoma is. that is an absolute disaster on one side of the ball. They are legitimately 3 to 4 snaps of the football away from being 5-1 or 6-0. If you looked at their schedule at the beginning of the year and you said you're going to have a chance to win every one of these games, I think that they would have taken it. And then the most alarming part is that with the defense being vastly improved, the offense has had opportunities in every one of these losses with a series, whether it's in the fourth quarter or late, whether it's to try to come back or to put the game away. They've gone onto the field and haven't executed. And I think that's the biggest worry. The last bit of truthful, information is that this is a transition year for them. You look at the youthfulness on the offensive line, you look at what's going on, and with their roster, this is not a roster that we should have expected, to make a deep run, and yet they're right there with a couple of snaps. And so I'm personally less concerned about USC than I am some other coaches. And I get it. The record, as you pointed out, Matt Rule's doing a great job and Cignetti's doing a great job. USC playing Indiana's schedule would be 6-0 without a doubt. There's just not a doubt in my mind. This is still a team with a win over LSU, and this is still a team that has had ample opportunities and had 7-point leads in every fourth quarter of all of these 3 losses. Sounds like I'm a USC apologist. You've got to go out there and win the games. But having said that, man, Bobby Bowden used to say, you lose big, you lose small, then you win small, then you win big. And as this team is growing, I feel like these small losses, if they can retain some culture, will turn into small wins and then can turn into big wins. But Lincoln's not a bad coach, guys. Like that. And here's the other part. Have you seen, I can't stand our industry. Oh, I can't stand it. Like, we put up these stupid graphics about, in his first 27 games, it's the same as Clay Helton. Or it used to happen with Jim Harbaugh. All you guys from the South used to be, Paul Feinbaum, just a clown, would put up those graphics about Brady Hoke and Jim Harbaugh. And it's like, if you're too dumb to understand that the programs are in vastly different spots, then that's not my problem. And unfortunately, narratives start and fans that maybe aren't totally privy to watching the games and really understanding the sport, they'll buy into these narratives about like, well, he's no different than Clay Helton. Like, give me a break. Those programs are in vastly different spots. And so that's what I get frustrated with, is I think that the narrative is false with USC.
Hugh Freeze, Brian Harsin, we're seeing those graphics here at Auburn right now, so we're familiar with those graphics. They're just real. I don't know if you've seen it or not. I don't want to put you on the spot, but Kirby Smart pushing the Mississippi State player. Can you give me your thoughts on that from a high IQ football mountaintop? What do you think of that situation?
Well, you probably give me too much credit. Should have gotten a flag. Official is right there. And if a player does the same thing, gets a flag immediately. And in a lot of ways, the flag would have kind of put it to bed, allowed him to address it right away. That's number one. Number two, come out and apologize. Like, just come on, man. Like, makes it really easy to dislike the program with everything going on there. Like, it's frustrating from my standpoint because you want, I don't want it to be an issue. I want to just talk about Texas and Georgia. I want to talk about Beck's 400 yards. I want to talk about how, like, hey, what is Georgia's run game? Is it the 3 games where they've run it for over 5 yards a carry, or is it the 3 games that they've run it for under 4 yards per carry? Is that the key to their season? Does a second loss put them in a precarious spot in terms of moving forward for the play? And no, we're sitting here talking about Kirby running and bumping into a Mississippi State player. Just apologize and put it behind you, and then like let's move on. And from that standpoint, it's infuriating. Like, and it's in his hands. Just address it and move on. I generally disdain topics that take the focus off of the players, off of the execution, and off of the sport. And this is one of those. This is one of those times and topics. Do I think that it was heat of the moment and it kind of like, listen, is he a bad guy? Should he get like super reprimand? Probably not. It kind of all happens right there. One, should there have been a flag? Yes, absolutely. Again, like the officials, what are officials doing right now? And number two, just address it and move on so that we can talk about the game this week.
By the way, Kalen DeBoer 5-1 in his first 6 games. Nick Saban 4-2.
Okay, there's another comparison. Build the graphic.
Clearly.
Build the graphic.
Build the graphic.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer's next game is at Tennessee. Joel Klatt is with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. MyBookie has Alabama a 2.5-point favorite at Tennessee right now. There is no way around the fact that Nico is regressing, though, Joel. I don't know who's going to win this game, but Nico is regressing.
No doubt. No doubt. Both of these teams desperately need this win.
Yeah.
Because not just for the obvious like standings scenarios going on, but just for the confidence in the locker room. And Nico definitely needs it. I think Bama's secondary has got to be thrilled right now that it's like, oh man, thankfully this passing game is not on point, because that's the only part of Tennessee's team that I don't think is very good, is their passing game. Here's what's going on with Nico, and I've gone and watched the film. Okay, there's a lot of different offensive systems out there. I happen to cut my teeth on a system where the timing of the offense and the timing of the passing structure was kept in the quarterback's feet. Okay, and this is a very West Coast philosophy, and I understand that, but I think it's a philosophy that should be adopted more and more widespread. What you see generally is that the best offenses at both the NFL level and in wide part at the college level have some roots in the West Coast and have some roots in this idea that the timing of the spacing of the passing game is kept in the quarterback's feet. So this is what that means. Like, there was all sorts of different dropbacks based on the concept you were running. There's a quick 3 and firm. There's a big 3 and firm. There's a quick 5 and firm. There's a quick 5 and close. There's a quick big 5 and close. There's a quick 7 and firm. All these different types of clocks. And this is how your feet operate. You're running through, you're hitting your last step and you're getting the ball out. You're hitting your last step and you're closing in a hitch step. And when you're in a close clock, then it's 1 close to number 1, 1 close to number 2. And then if you're on your third close, you better be on the check down or running. So the clock of the offense is kept in the quarterback's feet, right? And you can teach a guy how to work through his progression. And then based on his clock and his feet, the wide receivers understand when they need to be presenting the pictures necessary and the spacing necessary for him to create completions. Now, if you don't do that, then basically you're just trying to say like, hey, quarterback, like, hey, read through it. And it's like, well, on what timing? And what I see from young Nico Iamaleava is that he doesn't understand the urgency with which to run through the progression. Someone needs to stand behind him like a melodrome or whatever they call it, and just give him a rhythm of like 1, 2, 3, ball, because he stands there and just hangs on 1. Every time I do this in my show, every time I say hangs, I think of Teddy KGB hanging around. He's hanging around on number 1. And I'm like, man, like, get the ball out. And that's what's wrong with their passing game, is the timing with which he operates is too slow. And he sits on one read while another in the picture is coming open, and then there's very little anticipatory throwing. That needs to change. I don't know if it's going to change in 1 week. And then on the flip side, Alabama's in a position where if their offense doesn't play well, they're going to be in a tight game. And if their defense doesn't play well, they're going to be in a shootout. And basically meaning if they face a good team, there's a good likelihood that they're going to need to score 40 points. And if they don't play a good team like South Carolina and Milroe struggles at all, they're going to be like battling for it. And This is I think it's a desperation game. Think about the narrative surrounding Tennessee and Josh Heupel or even worse, like the narrative surrounding Alabama, if they go lose to a struggling redshirt freshman quarterback in Tennessee, and Kalen DeBoer takes his second loss, they look bad for 3 straight weeks. I mean, oh my goodness. Then he would be 5-2, exactly like Nick Saban was in his first year.
Yeah, exactly.
Metronome, the word you were looking for.
Metronome, there you go.
The only points I'd deduct from that otherwise spectacular description there is metronome.
Well, my vocabulary has never been strong.
Metro Dome actually collapsed.
That is correct,
point.
yes. Bad snow day.
Oh, that's right, under the weight of the snow.
That is right. All right, he is Joel Klatt. See him Saturday as Nebraska visits Indiana. And no way did I think this would be an 11-1 combined record game this year. That's pretty remarkable. That's what we're getting on the Big Noon Kick.
It is. And wrap your head around the fact that on November 23rd, Indiana could play Ohio State, and the undefeated team is Indiana.
I know.
Wow. How about that?
Crazier, yes.
By the way, I never had Provo to Bloomington on your travel itinerary, buddy.
By the way, how good is that BYU team?
Defensively, they're really good. Yeah. I think their front seven is well, first of all, their front seven, they've got like 3 25-year-olds. And, it's like, that's a thing, guys. Like,
Fafita had no shot in that game. I mean, they were in his grill nonstop.
Yes, and their defensive structure is actually incredibly intricate because they're all veterans. They had injuries last year at safety, so they played a lot of safeties, and now they get all of these guys back. They're older players. It's Jay Hill's second year. And so the defense is really good. I don't know how good their offense is, but if you're asking me, like, could that team win a Big 12 championship? The answer is yes. Yeah. And partly because of what that league is. And, I think that league is 6 or 7 teams deep in terms of any given Saturday could win the Big 12 championship. BYU's one of them, which you got to wrap your head around what this means for the playoff. Like, we're going to have a pretty random Big 12 champ get a bye and a top 4 seed in the college football playoff, which I think is fantastic. Being in Provo, guys, Arizona playing BYU, and it's like there's playoff implications. The fact that people thought that the expanded playoff was going to ruin the regular season is comical to me because it's just made it better.
Yeah, I was wrong about that. I thought it would ruin it, and it has not. Best press box view in football, Provo?
It's pretty good. Unfortunately for like Folsom in Colorado, the mountains are behind you because you're on the other side of the Rockies, whereas like in Provo, you're at the beginning of the Rockies. So if press boxes are always on the west side, why? Because the sun sets in the west in the afternoon, and you don't want people in the press box staring into the sun. So fields always lie north and south so that one team is not staring into the sun, going all these different things. But yes, that's the reason why it's probably the best view in all of football.
Oh, okay. All right, here's Joel Klatt. You'll see him on that game, Indiana-Nebraska, on Saturday. Thank you very much, Klatt. Have a great week.
You got it, guys. Have a great week.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next week. Klatt with us each week, courtesy of MyBookie.ag. Code next round. Your initial deposit. When you sign up and make that deposit, they double it when you use code next round. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag.